Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new track guide here on F124. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to master Imola and showing you first of all the setup that I'm going to be using for this video. So you can see we have 50, 31 wings, 90, 30, 100 all the way to the left on the camber and toe settings, and then 41, 10, 21, 21, 25, 56 on the ride height, 100% brake pressure with 55 brake bias. You can also go down to 54 if you want a little bit more rotation. But of course, in time trial, you're going to be running this very low tire pressure. Generally, from what I've found in time trial, tire pressure is not really mattering that much, to be honest. But when you do get into GP mode online, league races, career mode, where tire temperatures are enabled, you want to be slamming these tire pressures all the way up to the maximum to help assist you with the management of the tire temperatures inside of the game. So how we're going to do this is I'm going to be showing you a slow lap at first, going over the intricate details of the braking zones, corners, apexes, etc. And then I'm going to be showing you a hot lap guide that put me P2 in the world on the leaderboard. So that being said, the lap is going to be starting even before you launch into the start-finish line. And that lap is going to be starting here on this exit curbing. The reason it starts here is you want to be opening up the track as much as possible before you get to the final apex here, and then you can start opening up the power, use up all the road on the exit, and that'll be slingshotting you out. A little trick here is to bring your car all the way over to the left before starting your lap. This will give you 2-3 extra meters to accelerate the car, opening up DRS, and then bringing your car back to the inside of the track here, where the start-finish line activation zone is right underneath my car. And like I say, by bringing your car all the way over to the left-hand side before starting the lap, you get 2-3 extra meters of acceleration before going across the start-finish line. That can equate to a few thousandths of a second, but a few thousandths of a second can make all the difference. Here's a neat little trick for you going down the pit straight here at Imola. Bring 2 tires on to the curbing on the left-hand side. The reason for that is that the car will be lifted up from the floor, and while you're traveling normally on the racing line at, let's say, 200 miles an hour, the front of the car is scraping along the floor, and this is going to, of course, make friction and be slowing you down. So by bringing 2 tires onto the inside curbing here, you can actually lift up the floor and make sure it's not generating unnecessary friction while going down the straight, thus giving you a bit extra top speed. Again, it's only a few thousandths of a second, but a few thousandths of a second is more than worth having. So coming down into turn 1, you'll be bringing your car parallel with the curbing on the right-hand side and trying to get your car as straight as possible. You'll be braking around the 70 meters to about 50 meter zone, depending how confident you are on the brake pedal, but I do advise going around the 70 meters. So what I would advise is going to the curbing, and then sort of just counting half a second in your head, and then hitting the brake pedal. That can be a good reference to have for a corner that does not have that many braking references. Into turn 1 on this game is quite unique, to be honest. You can use all the way up on this curbing, so your only worry is about track limits and not actually about the yellow sausage curb on the inside. Although it looks quite big, it maybe looks a bit intimidating, ultimately you can drive over it and have very little disturbance to the car. So that's something that you have to take into account and really commit hard to. The better your commitment is in the first chicane, the better the exit will be as well. On the exit curbings, you can use up to the yellow sausage curbs again, but it's a bit unnecessary and actually causes a bit of bouncing in the car, what can ruin your exit. So I recommend only going up to the white and red part of the curbing. Bring your car all the way to the left-hand side, and in qualifying trim, this corner, I should say, is easily flat out in this car, and it is going to be on the white part of the curbing to help you rotate the car and minimize the distance through the left-hander. Use the exit curb if you need to, but try to avoid it as it will cause unnecessary bouncing and friction over the curb that can cause a bit of a loss in straight line speed. Coming up to the second chicane here, you want to bring your car all the way to the red part of the curbing, and then turning in when the car gets to the end of the curbstones, and this can be a really nice reference marker for going into the chicane. Again, similar to turn 1, that you actually want to be using all of the curb here, all the way up to the track limit. So putting your left-hand tires on the yellow part of the curbing, and only worrying about the white line as your definition for where the car should be. Bring the car as far to the left as possible, but ideally, and normally you would be about where this black line is in the middle of the road. But again, the further left you can keep your car, the better advantage you have for the right hand side. Speaking of the right-hand side, with this final right-hander of the first sector, once again, using as much curbing on the inside as possible, and this will be allowing you the best track width and opening up the corner as much as possible. In this game, the curbing is really little, to be honest. They're doing very little to be upsetting the balance of the car, so you can really attack them and maximize them to your advantage. On the exit, the track limits are a bit funny, a bit strict, to be honest. I say strict, different compared to previous years. And previous years, it was basically if you had one wheel inside of the white line, your lap was still legal. Whereas this game, it seems a bit like you have to keep two wheels inside the white line to keep your lap legal. So, for example, this would be legal, but for example, that would not be legal because my right rear tire is outside of the white line, outside of the track limits, even though it looks like I'm still inside of the track limits by the F123 definitions of the rulebook. So keep that in mind, that you have to keep two wheels within the track limits on this track, on this game, and not just one, at least for my testing. That being said, use up as much of the road as possible and then bring your car over to the right hand side. You'll be braking at the 50-meter board, and due to the instability in the rear of the car as you get towards this apex, the rear comes quite floaty, becomes quite loose, comes quite lacking grip, lacking confidence, to be honest. It's really a difficult corner to nail. You actually want to go a gear higher than you normally would be doing in this situation. On F123, you would be in third gear here, whereas this year, I should say, I find going in fourth helps me get better mid-corner stability, and that mid-corner stability is helping me launch off the corner in a better way, keeping my minimum speed up, keeping a downforce airflow over the car, and this is helping generate better lap time potential throughout this apex. Speaking of the apex, like I say, although it might feel a bit unnatural to be in fourth gear, it will definitely help the car roll through the apex a bit better. Come to your clipping point in the middle of the road, and then hard back on the power, using up all the road on the exit. Once again, the more curbing you use here, the better, because the curbing is doing very little to upset the car on this year's game. So if you can use more curbing, go for it, use it. Little sneaky trick, again, as you're coming over the crest of this hill, the front of the car will actually start to bottom out as you go over the crest. So you want the car to be as straight as possible as you get to the crest of the hill to minimize the scrubbing and friction generated by the fall of the car bottoming out. And by doing that, you can maximize your straight line potential going up to this fast left-hander. Speaking of the fast left-hander, of course, bring your car all the way to the right-hand side, and as soon as that 50-meter board goes out of your view, then you can start mentally preparing for the corner. Once again, this corner does not really have a reference point. It's very difficult in that regard. So it's one of those corners that if you're driving time trial in a static condition, you can use this shadow as a really nice turn-in reference. But ultimately, that shadow might not be there in all race conditions, all qualifying conditions, and all situations in career mode as well. So it's good for time trial. It's good for a certain weather pattern, but it's not good overall. But with that being said, again, I like to keep the car in 6th gear here. While F123 was down in 5th gear, it would help the rotation last year. This year, I find, like I say, taking a higher gear can help the car be more stable and to guide through the apex in a more flattering and dynamic and smooth way. This is a really key part of this year's game, is you're traveling so fast and the friction of the rear tires is so critical to not scrub them, that by carrying a higher gear with a better, more consistent baseline of a car performance helps me get more performance out of the car over one lap and over consistency as well over the whole race. Once again, using up as much curb as possible on the inside. Last year, I would never touch the red part of the curb, but this year you can really attack the curbs and go over fully the inside of the curbing. Similar to the end of Sector 1, you have to keep two wheels inside the track limits here, whereas last year, again, you could effectively point your car like this and still have the lap being legal, only having one tyre inside the bounds of the track, whereas this year, it seems like you have to keep two wheels within the bounds of the track, so keep that in reference for your mind as you come towards the exit of this really difficult corner. Flying down the hill into Accliminalali. I love to pronounce that name. Accliminalari. I just love it. It's fantastic. You want to keep your car parallel with this white line as you're coming up to the high-speed right-hander of the first part of the corner. I was going to say Accliminalari again, but I don't want to use it too many times. But then you're coming over to the right hand side, and this corner is so easily flat out. But the thing what's difficult and compromising about this apex is the front of the car starts to bottom out and touch the floor as you get to the clipping point, and this will cause understeer and a little bit of instability in the car and unpredictability as well. For that reason, I choose not to use the inside curbing that much, to be honest. Maybe in a race I will, because the grip is less, to take a tighter line, a tighter radius around the corner on the initial part is a bit more critical. But in time trial and in qualifying, when the grip is so high that the corner is easily flat out, I would recommend not really using the curb to keep the car more stable, to keep the car more predictable, and allowing yourself to straight line the braking zone for this next critical right-hander. Again, using up as much of the curb that you feel comfortable with and bringing your car all the way to the white line if you do feel comfortable doing that. Again, it's so difficult and so tricky though. Conversing compared to the previous corners, to be honest, actually I like to try and use a bit of the inside curbing here, because you're rising up the hill so much right now that you're going to be really susceptible to snap oversteer, unpredictability, undrivability in the car as well. So by taking a bit of inside curbing doesn't really help the stability of the car, but actually makes the track a bit wider for the exit, because you're using about 30 centimeters more track on the right hand side of the car, what means you can ultimately have 30 centimeters more track on the exit of the corner as well. And that can be really critical as you're coming up over this hill, because again, as I've talked about, the track limits seem to be keeping 2 wheels within the white line, not just one, what makes this corner so difficult to nail on the exit, because unlike other corners, it's a completely curved white line. And to show the difficulty and the technicality of it, for example, last year, you could sort of run your car straight across this curbing and get away with it, because at least always at one point, one tyre was in the white line. But on the exit of this corner, naturally you want to push it as much as possible. But this year, this is not legal. And this is what your car would look like last year in an ideal situation. So you really can only put your car like halfway over this curb now because of the white line limitation. Actually, it's a bit more like 3/4 of the way, whereas last year you could take all the curbing and sort of bring the car back to the white line, just touching the front right with the tire. Whereas this year you have to keep it parallel with the white line, so you're not able to use the full curb width on the exit. So again, keep that in mind. Coming up to the chicane, so difficult, so technical, so unpredictable as well. It's a really difficult corner to nail. You're bringing your car all the way to the left-hand side of the track and bringing up to the red or the white part of the curbing, depending what you feel comfortable with. I like to take the initial part of this corner in 4th gear to help the car become more settled, more predictable, as ultimately this is such a really unpredictable corner on this year. Sometimes you can nail it, sometimes you can't, sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, and it's really hard to get a gravitas to why something is working, why something is not working. So with that being said, I like to take 4th gear on the entry, of course use as much curbing as possible, as it doesn't really unsettle the car on this game, as I've touched upon before. And then depending how the car can land from the first curbing, because again it can be a pretty unpredictable experience, I either like to go down into 3rd gear and take the inside curbing, or I would run the car around this curbstone in 4th gear, looking for the better exit possible. And the difference between the two options basically is when you land off this first curbing, if your car is pointing towards the yellow part of the curbing, then I would recommend just committing to that, shifting down into 3rd, and then trying to get the rotation out of the corner. Whereas if you land from the first curbstone, and your car is still pointing towards the red, white, and green part of the curb, then I would recommend staying in 4th gear and then just running the car around for the best exit possible, again using up all the curbing as well while doing that. Coming up into the final sequence of corners here on Imola, you're ultimately going to be braking at the 50-meter board going down into final sequences. And I like to go down into 4th gear, not really using the outside curbing here as it's a bit unnecessary, and for the speed that you can carry through the corner anyway, it's just a bit of a risk, and it's unsettling to the car and can cause a front right lockup if you're using the right-hand curbing excessively anyway. So I don't really like to touch it if I can avoid it on a lap-to-lap basis. But the inside curbing, I like to fly over. I like to be, again, using up all the curbing on the inside in 4th gear to help the car float through the apex like I've talked about before, to be a bit more consistent, to be a bit more pliable, drivable, dynamic, and that really helps me have confidence within the racing car to maximize the corner. So that being said, again, using up all the track as much as possible, all the way up to the white line. And then on the exit, again, be careful, track limits, as I've already talked about 3-4 times in this video. Keep 2 wheels within the white line and not just one. And then you're coming up into the final corner, using up as much road on the entry as possible, and then just dabbling the inside curbing to help pick up the car, rotate the car, use a bit more track width as well, and then on the exit, full throttle, using up all your curbstone as possible, keeping the car all the way to this white line on the right hand side for the shortest distance, and then you can be getting a small advantage here by opening the DRS, of course, and then keeping your car on this green part of the track. Again, it might gain you a thousandth of a second, and you don't want to invalidate like I just did, because you can see how easy it is to do by just going a little bit over the white line too much. But if you can basically keep your car like this and traveling a constant trajectory around the white line, you can save about a meter or two, and that can be a thousandth of a second or 2,000th of a second, what can make all the difference when it comes to pole position here in Imola circuit. With that being said, now I'm going to be showing you the lap that put me P2 on the leaderboard here for the end of the video. Riding on board here, how to master Imola on F1 24. Open up the track, get as much speed, get the DRS wide open, flying down into turn 1. Turn 1, you're bringing the car over to the right hand side of the track, braking just after the curb starts, down into 5th gear, using all the curbs, fully committed, flat out for the left hander, keep the car to the right hand side, up into 7th. Nearly flat out for the entry to the corner, through the right hander down to 5th, great on the exit, up to the low speed hairpin in 4th gear to keep the stability in the car, back on the power, using as much curb as possible on the right hander. Flat out over the crest, get ready for the left hander, happening intermittently, down into 6th gear, over the crest, down the hill, Akminalali, flat out for the right hander, hard on the brakes, down to 4th gear, the car will snap on the exit, be ready, be careful, be activated for it. Bring the car to the left hand side, fly over the curbings here, down into 3rd gear for the second part of the apex, hard back to the power, coming up into the final apexes of the lap here in Imola. Now braking just before the 50 meter ball, down into 4th gear, you got all the curb on the inside, just a lift of the throttle through the left hander, hard back up to the power, and this is how to master Imola on F1 24.